importance of Ireland's implementation of our EU digital Covid cert, or what we used to call the EU Green Cert. I think we're all aware that the Government has signed up to the EU Covid Cert with a start date of the 19th of July, albeit that it's 2 weeks later than the rest of our European colleagues. But the cert has been developed by the EU Commission over the last 6 months under their plan, A Common Path to a Safe and Sustainable Reopening, and the importance of reopening our skies and gaining back our crucial connectivity, I don't think can be understated. We have hundreds of thousands of families that are relying on us to get this reopening right, and so therefore it has to be both safe and easy, and we have to get access to travel unhindered. So when we talk about reopening of travel, I think it's often inaccurately framed either in the media or on our social media as young people who are desperate to head off to Ibiza. And come here, there's nothing wrong with wanting to go to Ibiza. I nearly want to be going myself, but I think it ignores the far greater impact on families that have been torn apart over the continent. Grandparents who haven't seen the new arrivals that have come in the last 15 or 16 months. Daddies, in lots of cases, who haven't even seen their own children, who've missed birthday parties, and many more heart-wrenching examples. So the introduction of this Covid cert, I believe, is going to be a game changer for these people. And while I'm speaking on the subject, I want to just thank the Taoiseach for his very strong commitment to implementing the cert. There was some suggestions last week that we would be excluding young people from accessing the cert, and I think that would be absolutely reprehensible and incredibly disrespectful to our young people, and I'm glad to hear that it's not being entertained. So, Minister, we're 4 weeks away from the Irish implementation of the cert, and the lack of information and actually the huge amount of disinformation that's circling on our social media challenges is a real problem. I'd like to hear in your response, if possible, the details about the logistics of the cert. So much of the debate around our return to international travel so far has come from our public health, and their balance of risks obviously would be different to governments. So I think what we really need to hear about the details of the cert is, how is it going to work? How are Irish citizens actually going to get one? Who will issue them? When can people apply? And will our testing and our vaccination systems feed into it? And if they will, how? So I'm looking forward to hearing your response. But these are the issues, I think, that need to be laid out. And if it's possible, and I'm sure you will do this, but if it's not already planned, can we have a public information campaign so that people can dispel the disservice of what was going on over the weekend, of people thinking that they need PCR tests on the way out as well as the way back, as opposed to just the requirements of the country that you're travelling into. So thank you very much for coming this morning. I look forward to your response.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and thank you, Senator, for raising this issue. And you're right that there has been a lot of disinformation, and not all of it, I think, intentional. Sometimes these ideas start to float around, and they do need to be clarified. So thank you for bringing this to the House this morning, and I welcome the opportunity, as I always do, to speak in the Senate. So thank you. As you'll know, an EU digital Covid certificate is a digital proof that a person has either been vaccinated against COVID-19 or else has received a negative test result or has recovered from COVID-19. There are 3 separate certificates for those 3 events. Being in receipt of an EU digital Covid certificate should enable the holder to be exempted from free movement restrictions. However, Member States do have the right to impose additional travel restrictions on the holders of an EU digital Covid certificate, provided they are necessary and proportionate to safeguard public health. In such a case, for instance, as a reaction to new variants of concern, the Member State would have to notify the Commission and all other Member States to justify this decision. Each country will be responsible for issuing certificates where vaccination, positive tests for recovery or negative tests have taken place in that country. In Ireland, the Government recognises how stretched the HSE is at the moment in trying to support the vaccination rollout and business as usual while recovering the damage caused by the recent ransomware attack. And consequently, we are looking at how we can best support them with these new obligations. So, for example, my own department, which is Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, through the Office of Government Chief Information Officer, is working with the private sector to develop the system to support the negative test certificates. So we will be issuing those certificates to say that you've tested negative in the previous 3 days. However, the Department of Health and the HSE are responsible for issuing vaccination certificates and recovery certificates. So they're managing that part of the project. The EU Digital Covid Certificate contains only the necessary key information such as name, date of birth, date of issuance, relevant information about vaccine test or recovery, and a unique identifier. This data remains on the certificate, and it is not stored or retained when a certificate is verified in another member state. For verification purposes, only the validity and the authenticity of the certificate is checked by the person verifying it who issued it and signed it. All health data remains with the member state that issued an EU digital COVID certificate. The system itself is logical. Each EU digital COVID certificate will contain a QR code with a digital signature to protect it against falsification. When the certificate is checked, the QR code is scanned and the signature is verified. The signature can be checked against using special software that can be run from an app, on a phone or any other device that can read a QR code. Each issuing body has its own digital signature key, which will be securely stored. We're only planning to have one or possibly two for our certificates. The European Commission has built a gateway through which the certificate signatures from each member state can be verified across the EU. It's important to note that the personal data of the certificate holder does not pass through the gateway, as this is not necessary to verify the digital signature. The digital EU digital COVID certificate can be stored on a mobile device, although citizens can request a paper version if they need it. Both will have a QR code, and that QR code contains essential information as well as a digital signature to make sure that the certificate is authentic. Member States have agreed on a common design that can be used for the electronic and paper versions to facilitate the recognition. So I'm pleased to advise that the Ireland certificate has been designed and the digital signature has already been tested with the EU. It's important that we stress test the overall process. We need to develop the most efficient way to enable travellers to be checked before departing the island, and also visitors or returners to be checked on entry back into Ireland. To that end, the Government has set up a group of stakeholder departments to work on the processes, and this group are also liaising with other key stakeholders, such as the carriers and the testers. I should say that a lot of work has been and is still required to enable the system to work properly, and of course all within very challenging timescales. However, I am confident that Ireland will be ready for the 18th of July, and I commend everyone who has worked so hard during our preparations and will continue to do so until everything is ready. Everyone recognises the importance of this initiative in helping the return to some form of normality. We're all committed to continuing to work closely in a coordinated manner with the Commission and Member States to support EU citizens' right to free movement. With the rollout of digital COVID certificates and further the opening up of travel from third countries. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Minister. And respectfully, and I have absolutely no doubt about our intent or your intent, but what you've told me is that we're still at design stage. And the questions that I asked of how somebody would actually even apply, are we going to log on to a website, obviously isn't and hasn't been decided yet. So these are the things, you know, how is it going to work? How will Irish citizens actually apply for one? Who will give it to them? I think you've alluded to the fact there'll be 3 certs. Will we go to 3 different places? Will it be the HSE that I go to get my vaccination cert and deeper to go and get my digital cert? Again, I'm not trying to be smart, but you know, what we're trying to do is to give clarity, and so I appreciate what you're saying is that it's still at design stage. When do you think we will be in a position to actually make a definitive statement that here is clear and unambiguous information as to how you will, on the 18th of July or the 19th of July, log on to here, or go and queue outside office here? When do you think you'll be able to give that information? And secondly, can I ask you, I feel like I'm banging my head off a brick wall trying to get an antigen pilot test done here so that we can be equivalent to our European counterparts. If in the absence of getting that pilot, there's €100 million of a fund that you have alluded to from the EU to support the costs of PCR tests, what plans do we have to actually, like, will we introduce a voucher scheme for Irish travellers so when they do return to Ireland they have to pay a very expensive cost for PCR? Will we give people a voucher to help towards those costs? People we're encouraging to travel who are vaccinated but have children who can't get vaccinated. What will we do to help those people to be able to allow them to reunite their families this summer? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So firstly, how do you apply? In the case of a test certificate, you go to an accredited laboratory and they send your certificate to you. So you give your email address at the time and it comes on to you and you choose whether you want it on paper or on your phone. How do you apply for a vaccination certificate or a recovery certificate? The HSE will email you and contact you, and you can opt to download it from there. So that's no requirement there. When data was gathered very carefully all the way through the vaccination stage and stored in the COVAX system that the HSE is using so to keep track of who has been vaccinated and who has tested positive in the past 9 months, and that data has been analysed. I wouldn't say we're at design stage. The specification was laid out by the EU over the past 6 months or so. The antigen tests and the costs and so on. Antigen tests will be, you can have an antigen test on your certificate, and if somebody accepts that in another country, then that's great. And if the Minister for Health and the government decide to accept antigen tests coming in, then they will be accepted too. So, you know, the antigen test, however, must be performed by a professional, either a medical professional or somebody who is qualified to do it. And they will not be, I think that the current rate is not that much cheaper than a PCR test. So that's something to bear in mind.